I think we all know who Kip is, and we're really happy he's here today. And he was, of course, elected as presiding commissioner in November of 2022. When Kip gave one of his stump speeches, I remember he said, I thought he was from Maurice County. Is that where you grew up, Kip?
Monroe City, so kind of Monroe, Marion, Rawls County area.
Okay, got it. So he originally came from Northeast Missouri, and like many of our those of us that come to Boone County, came here for his education about 20 years ago. He got his undergraduate at Columbia College and then his master's at University of Missouri. For 8 years, he was in the Missouri General Assembly, 6 years as our state representative from the 45th. And then about 2 years ago, he had switched over to be chief of staff for Senator Razor. And then he ran for presiding commissioner, and we are so lucky in Boone County. Just one last thing, I think we all know that he has a strong background in budget, which will definitely help us in Boone County, I'm sure. Thanks for being here, Kip.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and we'll get a chance to talk about the master plan, but wanted to, it will certainly allow plenty of time for questions as well. And want to kind of keep everybody updated on ARPA, kind of where that is in the process, and also talk a little bit about a housing study RFP that was released this week by the county. This week, last week, weeks running together at this point. So it was recently released. But I know I'm here today to talk about the master planning process that we're undertaking for the first time since 1996. I didn't know who best to distribute the brochure to, so I sent it on to Scott Crystal, asked for him to share the brochure, the PDF with everybody in Muleskinners, just to make sure you have a good background. But a great place to go for additional information is ourboone.com. That's ourboone.com. Will be a place for you to sign up for the listserv, to get a kind of a good breakdown, probably a better explanation than I'm going to provide on what the master planning process is, and then checking back there for updated calendar as well. But if you sign up for the listserv on that page, you'll certainly get releases and emails on updates on where we are on our timeline. So Boone County currently has a master plan that was created in 1996. Obviously, a lot has changed in Boone County since that time. The master planning process is, we typically see these take place in municipalities across the state, across the nation, but it's somewhat unique for counties to undergo a master planning process, especially here in the state of Missouri, where the vast majority of counties are non-zoned counties. But Boone County, being a zoned county, this process of master plan really acts as that guiding document, that vision for where we want to be as a county, not where Boone County government wants us to be, where we want to be as a county, and how we adjust our land use policies to reflect that vision. 1996 is a long time ago, almost 30 years ago. You expect talking with our consultant, you expect a master plan to really be good for about 15 to 20 years. But one thing that we will be intentional on during this process is to make sure that we can build in benchmarks to the final version of this master plan, to make sure that we will take it off of the shelf and never shelve it completely, right? But there's look back periods in once we have a master plan, that we're keeping it updated as best we can in the future until we undergo this process again, 15 to 20 years down the road. The timeline on undergoing the master plan process is roughly 18 to 24 months. We're a good month and a half or 2 months into this at this point. The consultant who won the award for helping us through this process is the I-5 group out of the St. Louis area. I-5 Group's also, they're subcontracting with a number of other consultants who are assisting us in specialty areas. So there are a group of them working together who have specialty areas kind of unique, that will be unique to this plan. One of the first things that we've started just this last week on June 14th, we put together an advisory committee and a technical committee. So the advisory committee is made up of stakeholders, of organizations. There's a few large employers, there's nonprofits, there are watershed representation on there. We tried to put on a wide variety of interested parties and advisors around Boone County, some with quite a few with competing interests that will hopefully, we need to hear those voices, right? We need those competing interests to be at the table so that we don't get into a groupthink mentality, and so that we're hearing kind of a broad range of diverse thought on what is expected and kind of where we want to see the growth occur and how we want to see a growth occur over the next 15, 20, 30 years into the future. We're oftentimes, especially here in Columbia, right? You can't go a day without running into a reporter, especially student journalists, and got an opportunity to talk to several student journalists about the master planning process. And a common question that would come up was, what do you want to see? As presiding commissioner, what do you want to see in the master plan? What's your goal? And you have to stop and take a step back. And it's like, it doesn't matter what I want to see. It doesn't matter necessarily what Boone County government wants to see in this plan. This is not our master plan. We will carry the master plan and hopefully, use it, as I mentioned, to tweak policies, to implement new policies at the county level and rethink land use regulations that may already be on the books and what may help us in the future. But this really is a reflection of where Boone County residents want us to be and the unique perspective that is Boone County. And I know I've talked to you guys before about it, but and you guys live here. Many of you have lived here much longer than I have. It's truly a special place where Missouri is the cross section of the United States, right? The gateway to the west. You have St. Louis, kind of that older East Coast type city, and Kansas City, really kind of Western city. You've got your north farmlands, row crops, and you've got towards the southern part of the state, you've got the rolling hills and the Ozark Mountains, and it's a very diverse state in a diverse country, and Boone County is really the cross section of Missouri. You have that. When I go to Centralia and anywhere in North Missouri, it's like being back in Monroe City. You're seeing the railroads, seeing the flat ground, seeing the farmland there, seeing the small town that revolves around the high school and the Friday night lights, and the beauty and the difference in our smaller communities that exist in Boone County is that I've seen over the years, I've seen Monroe City lose population. I've seen some important industry leave town, and they're continuing to do well, all things considered, in a tough economic environment for rural America and rural Missouri. But what's unique about Boone County is all of our smaller communities continue to grow, and they're seeing growth while also maintaining their identity. And it's important for us as we go through this master planning process, not just to become Columbia centric, right? It can be easy for us to default to a Columbia centric mentality where close to 70% of the population lives in the city of Columbia, and then the large percent of the population within Boone County that lives on the outer rim, on an unincorporated Boone County, kind of surrounding the city of Columbia. But it's important for us to have those voices all across the community, all across our many municipalities, and unincorporated Boone County represented on the advisory committee in stakeholder meetings and beyond, so that they can continue to anticipate growth and benefit from growth while also maintaining their sense of community as well. So kind of focus a little bit on the advisory committee. There's the technical committee that met the same day on June 14th. And that technical committee is really made up of our utilities, our water districts, our first responder, our emergency personnel communities, and other important stakeholders that are on the technical side of it that will have, play an important role in especially anticipating and hopefully, in certain cases, even guiding growth in the county over the years. One thing that I've come to, you have an idea of obviously the importance of infrastructure and the cost of infrastructure. But in my short time as presiding commissioner, a new appreciation for the importance of sewer infrastructure in particular, and how expensive sewer infrastructure is. Not that other infrastructure is not expensive, but where sewer exists, you really see growth occur because it is the most expensive utility to run, and it often kind of guides that growth. And so, ensuring that we have all those technical committee groups, those stakeholders, having a seat at the table, and making sure that we're having a collective conversation on anticipating growth, and hopefully growth is less reactionary as possible heading into the future, and more anticipated, and even, as I mentioned, potentially even using the levers of government, or the levers of utilities, the nonprofit utilities, or even for-profit utilities to guide that growth in certain areas of Boone County that are underdeveloped at this point. So those advisory and technical committees will continue to meet. Stakeholder meetings, and so we've helped our consultant put together a list of potential stakeholders, and we'll also be sending out additional stakeholder invites where during the month of July, kind of mid-July, they'll be here in Columbia, in Boone County, all across Boone County, holding stakeholder meetings with stakeholder groups, and gathering input from them. And staff and elected officials are not invited to those meetings, the stakeholder meetings. They really want to have a good broad conversation with stakeholders, and not have it be filtered through potential conflicts that may exist, or we don't want people to hold their tongues. We want people to really let us know how they're feeling, and kind of take away that pressure of having staff or elected officials nearby listening to that feedback that the stakeholder groups are providing. Things really start to ramp up in August of this year. We'll be releasing a survey that'll be an online survey that will certainly ask groups such as Muleskinners and every other organization we can to help facilitate communication of that survey out to out to their organizations, out to their friends, their family, anybody that they can get that survey out in front of, in order to help us receive the input on the survey. 2,000 randomly selected county addresses, mostly likely in unincorporated Boone County, will receive mailed surveys also during the month of August. And then during September, mid to late September, we'll begin the first round of open houses around the county to collect feedback, and to make people aware of the master plan process, and really try to do a better job at that point as well during open houses to catch people to encourage surveys. And we're gonna, as time allows, and and certainly as we, move into the summer months, we're going to try to organize some of those events in a manner that is fun, that's interactive with the community, and gives people a chance to come out and have some fun while also providing input and hearing more and learning more about the master planning process. So kind of fast forward, that's kind of taking us through, those open houses will take us through the fall, and then into 2024. There'll be additional rounds of ways to provide input to us. Those advisory committees and stakeholder meetings will continue. And we expect to have likely that first draft of a master plan to us to review, and to the community to review by mid 2024, likely probably late summer, early fall 2024. And then we expect probably, following that same timeline, by late 24 into early 25, we'll be adopting the master plan that will help us kind of rethink things. Like I said, have that vision moving forward for development growth and where we all want this county to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So that's, I know that's very general information. I'll make sure that the website was shared just a minute ago on the website, or in the chat, ourboone.com. Make sure to check it out. And also we'll get information out to the groups. We'll be doing press releases as we start to get those stakeholder meetings set. The open houses set. We'll certainly do press release and get information out when the survey is available and as it starts to be distributed to people. I want to switch gears before I open up for questions also to the housing study RFP. So this is something that excited to talk a little bit about. It will be the first time in Boone County's history that we will be undergoing a countywide housing study, initiating a housing study countywide. This is something that the City of Columbia had budgeted for their for FY23, and our great community services director Joanne Nelson, along with others who do a fantastic job running the community services department, jumped into the conversation and said, hey, this isn't just a city issue. This is a countywide issue and a much larger issue than that for sure. But what about if the county took the lead? And so this is just another example, I think, another good example of how the city and county are working together and coordinating and good communication and cooperating on kind of building out these plans and trying to find ways to work together. And so the county took the lead on this. The City of Columbia is helping us pay for it. The RFP is out there now. RFP, I think, end date on that is July 25th or 27th, somewhere around there. But the housing study will kind of focus on affordable housing. And for those of you on this Zoom, some of you may differ in opinions, and some experts may differ too. I wouldn't necessarily say we're at a crisis level on affordable housing, but we're certainly headed in that direction. And we will be at a crisis level for affordable housing in Boone County and certainly within the City of Columbia without careful consideration, careful planning moving forward. I always want to temper expectations on what a housing study may provide us. And local government's not going to get into the business of building affordable housing. We don't have that capacity, nor do we have that expertise. It's going to require working obviously with the private industry on ensuring the availability of affordable housing moving forward. But local government, municipal governments, county government certainly play a role in this. We certainly need to have a seat at the table, and the housing study is an important part of that, kind of beginning that process out. And not that the conversation hasn't been moving forward already, but this is certainly a good early step that will help us hopefully identify ways that we can, potentially get government out of the way at times on further development. And also, it will likely lead to kind of best practices on how we can potential incentives that that are been successful elsewhere. It is the show me state. There are certainly areas, especially, West Coast, think of West Coast or, Western states and Eastern states, right, that who have been, experiencing much more issues and crisis level affordable housing issues for a number of years compared to the Midwest and mid-Missouri. So there have been plenty of other states who and regions, local governments who have been able to find ways to address this, and so hopefully we'll get a good idea, a good snapshot of best practices to be able to implement moving forward. And so that and it's good, that the housing study is going to be undertaken at the same time as a master planning process, because there will be certainly overlap there, and there will certainly be things that are likely end up being reflected in the master plan to help us anticipate the need for more affordable housing and how that's related to land use policies moving forward. So excited to see that going, and appreciate all the work that Director Nelson, Joanne Nelson's done in the Community Services Department. ARPA, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I'll talk just for a second about ARPA and then open it up for questions. So when I came into office, that was certainly one of the top priorities, was getting the application out, setting deadlines on application deadlines, and getting the review process underway. So we set a Friday, March 31st deadline for ARPA applications, and we kind of broke it down into two funding buckets with roughly a little over $18 million remaining in ARPA funds. Up to $15 million in funding will be considered for that first round, or that March 31st deadline. And we wanted to make sure that we set aside some for a second round later in the year, likely an application deadline in late September or into October, depending on how this timeline goes currently. I was very naive when we were getting out doing the listening sessions on ARPA during the winter months and into spring about the review process. I thought that we could have decisions made on approved projects by early to mid-June. I was also under the assumption at that point that we would have, somewhere closer to 50 or so applications. Coming into the day on March 30th, or entering the day on March 31st, that morning, we had, I think, 27 or 28 applications. And by the end of the day, we ended up with over 107 applications requesting roughly $85 million in funding for $15 million availability. And so that in order to give those applications the consideration and that they deserve, and that county residents would expect of us, that approval process, that approval timeline is pushed back some. So we're cautiously optimistic at this point that we're making good progress, and that approved projects will be announced in late mid to late July, probably closer to late July at this point. But when you receive 107 applications, we wish we had over $85 million to work, because it's really hard to trim the list down. There's a lot of need out there. There are a lot of good proposals that were submitted to us, and that's part of the job. We're going to have to make the tough decisions and continue to narrow this pool. We didn't waste any time. We put a team of 20 individuals together across Boone County government, from departments and offices, and started reviewing applications on April 3rd, that Monday after the March 31st deadline. And it's been a heavy lift of staff and of us, of the commission as well, but we continue to make good progress on reviewing these applications. Have clarifying questions out to a lot of quite a few applicants at this point as we move forward, and also, having good productive conversations with the city of Columbia, because as they move through their process as well, it's going to be important that that there is some coordination and cooperation on ARPA funds, because we don't want to we certainly don't want to overfund a project if there are certainly applications that we have that they have as well, and so we need to make sure that there's good communication there, so so that determine who's going to take the lead on certain projects, and how we're going to make sure that those projects are funded adequately, but also not overfunded beyond what they've initially requested or needed to see their project through. So I could probably go on, but I know we're getting towards the end of the time, so I want to make sure to open up for questions.
Herb or Sue, you've had your hand up for a little bit.
Yes. I'm on the board for Rockbridge State Park. And when you're talking about county planning, and I recognize it's not just zoning issues, it's a range of things that you're doing. But I'm very concerned on Rockbridge State Park. In the last 10 or 12 years, we've had so much development up there, around there. And now the most recent threat was Canton Estates, which would, and granted that it's a plan to put that into the city. I recognize that, but the city and the county need to work together, and the county protects the from high development around green spaces. But the Canton Estates, and specifically, are a particular problem for the wild area of Rockbridge State Park, which is only one of 19 in the whole state. And I am concerned that the development will get so great around the park that eventually, within 100 years, we may have more like a city park almost, just because of you can't support the wildlife and the lack of light and all that if you're too crowded around. Do you have somebody like from a Greenbelt Trust or something like that, or somebody that is interested in trying to keep some undeveloped spaces and that sort of thing on your committee?
Yeah, so the advisory committee is we have several individuals who are I would say that they're environmentally focused on the committee. In this instance, we do have Kevin Roberson, president of Friends of Rockbridge State Park, right, who is on the advisory committee and participating as well. And so, that was certainly, when I met with him prior to asking him to be part of the committee, that was certainly one of his concerns. And, he comes at it from, he'll certainly talk and be focused on more than just that, but that was certainly a area of focus that he wanted to make sure that was addressed. So
yeah, and we also have Finger Lake State Park, I believe, in the county too. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so
there may be some
close to Department of Conservation land. I know that's state parks and Department of Conservation out there. So yeah. I don't know if they have a friends group or not.
No.
Yeah, we have, I know we have on our advisory committee as well, someone from, she retired from Department of Natural Resources, Leanne Tippett Mosby. Leanne's part of the committee representing the watershed, but she's also a sustainability manager now at the Mizzou. So I know that, she has a good, and Leanne, I don't think she worked for Department of Conservation, but I know she was high up in DNR and retired from there for a number of years. So she will certainly have that DNR focus as well.
Great, thanks for that. I noticed in the chat a little ways back, Kathy Jensen asked, is Randy Cole, the Columbia Housing Authority person, involved with that affordable housing survey?
Yes, yeah. So Randy's on our advisory committee for the master plan. We've also tapped him. We're still constructing, since the housing study is just out for RFP now. We don't have a final review group, but he has certainly been at the table on, even as we were developing the RFP. Randy will certainly be engaged and involved in that moving forward, be part of that, I forget what we're calling it, but basically the committee that will help us through that entire process. Yeah.
Raise your hand so it's clear. Sure.
Yeah, Herb, did you have something you wanted to ask too?
Kip, thank you for being here and thank you for being presiding commissioner.
Thanks.
And I want to say at the outset that I am so impressed with the county commission and other county officials in this county at the present time, several of whom are here. Thank you for coming and thank you for serving. Now, the hard question for all of you. What kind of shape is the master plan going to take? Now, in my technical view, there are two types of master plans adopted. But you'll forgive my use of technical language, one category is squishy and the other is less squishy. The squishy ones state mostly aspirations. The not so squishy also serve as broad financial plans, identifying concepts, categories, line items that numbers can be put upon as a first step in budgeting processes year after year ahead. Which direction are you hoping this master plan will go? Kip?
Well, so I mean, that's a very good question. I think less squishy, this will, from a budgeting standpoint, right? Like, I mean, I believe that the county still will need to go through a strategic planning process as far as Boone County government's concerned that may end up driving a bit more of the budgeting, in the next 10 to 15 years. And I think, I know that there's been a conversation already amongst the elected officials and continuing conversation about the need for strategic planning. We're probably still a year or two out on really beginning that process. And where the master plan is really, it's being the master planning process and the budget, the line items are within our resource management office, which is, basically our planning and zoning office at the county level. And so, there will certainly be budgeted items and included in there, but it will lead to more policy changes than anything else. And so I would, while parts of it will be aspirational, I think it will likely lead to, and I would expect the conversations I've had within resource management around the organization, I think the anticipated goal is to try to work through some of those more challenging things on the front end so that you can have some adopted policies and regulations on the back end. That's the that's the goal as we set forth on this. I think that's a collective goal. I don't think that's just my goal. I don't want to speak for everybody, but that seems to be the collective goal within county government. It's part of the reason, as I mentioned too, why we were pretty intentional about the advisory committee and trying to put some competing interest on there, right? So we can try to force some of these challenging conversations on the front end, and we'll be intentional about seeking input from a broad constituency that is Boone County on the survey and throughout the open house process as well.
Great, thank you. Dave Rathel in the chat asks, what's to be found in the housing survey that isn't available in the assessor's office?
That's a good question, Dave. So part of that is very much yet to be determined, right? On because the the housing study RFP, some of that will be obviously guided by the proposals that are put forward on ideas that those individuals or those organizations responding to it. But let me see if I can quickly find some of the outline goals in here. Dave, you may know where to find the published RFP as well, I suspect.
Well,
But we can make sure to, I can make
this
sure
just
to put
proves-
this in the link as well.
This just proves my wife and I don't share information.
There you go.
You know, she worked for the state for 30 years and I know where bodies are and I can't tell anybody.
Well, I'll make sure you have access to the public link to the RFP as well. But you know, some of the, you know, what we certainly hope to get an understanding of. Well, here you go. So so some of the scopes of the deliverables would be economic conditions across the county and in municipalities that make up Boone County, rental housing market, student housing, housing supportive services, home ownership market. Trends and need analysis, kind of looking at employment trends as well and growth trends, gap analysis on where you know, what segments and what issues we're having with housing availability, both on home ownership and rental side, barriers to access affordable housing.
Okay, that I was gonna wonder. For the complaint is housing is too expensive. It's too expensive to build. So one of the things that the survey will look into are the legitimacy of these claims. I mean, you know, someone could say, well, it's so expensive because I need more money, not that I can't do it at the price offered. Right. I want more. So that is part of the information you're looking for. What does it actually cost to build something, depending on what you're building?
That's, I mean, that will certainly be included. That's certainly included in what we're requesting from the proposals that'll be submitted to us. So the proposal list is about 5 pages long on kind of what we expect or what we would hope to receive as part of the proposal.
Sure.
It's a 27-page long RFP document, but about 6 or 7 of that's actually focused in really clearly on what the deliverables are.
All right, I'm skimming back through the chat. I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's any questions I've missed. And I've got other things going on in the chat, IT questions and things too. So it's kind of, mine's probably a little busier than yours. So if I missed one, please do call me on that. Oh, Pam, what would you like to ask?
When is the next meeting in person?
That's a good question, Pam. I apologize, I don't have that in front of me.
I thought there was one in July.
There will be stakeholder meetings starting the week of July 10th. There'll be the stakeholder meetings.
Okay.
That those the stakeholder groups, that list is still being developed and information being sent out to them to we can, if there are groups that you recommend, happy to we can add those to the list and get requests sent to them as well. So
Oh, good. And you'll have them at the commission building?
they're gonna do those offsite. They're gonna try to do that at the location of the stakeholder groups. And so they don't, like I mentioned before, the stakeholder meetings are not to involve any staff or elected officials in our end.
Yeah.
So trying to get more open feedback. So they'll be around the community and around Boone County.
Alice, do you want to ask your question?
So Kip, last time I checked, excuse me, 20% of people who live in Boone County, I think it was the entire county, are considered low income. Cost of living in Boone County is raising. We just saw the city increased our electric surcharge to the highest in any close by municipality, up an increase of 35%. I think Boone County Electric just had an increase. So anyway, will this master plan, you said look at policies, try to look at ways that we can help more working Boone Countyans who maybe can't afford these increases, and of course the inflation rate.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly I know came up in part of the discussion in the advisory committee, right? Is making sure that we can have a master plan developed that ensuring that, you know, part of what makes Boone County a great place to be is the quality of life, and part of the quality of life is also affordability of, you know, just being an affordable place to live, and which adds to the diversity of people who move here and who can remain in Boone County. And so I know that that'll be part of the discussion. That's certainly the focus, the intended focus of the housing study as well, is on affordable housing. And it's not, you know, is I think fortunately the affordable housing conversation has evolved over time to realize that it's not just affordability of rent or affordability of home ownership of the actual structure. It's the affordability of energy efficiency on, you know, keeping utility costs maintained, and proximity to retail stores, to grocery stores, and just what it means to actually have affordable housing. That definition is certainly matured over time, rightfully so. We've got a lot of housing, what has been considered affordable housing on the periphery of the city out in unincorporated Boone County, that, you know, when you add up the cost of being off of public transportation or in a less energy efficient home, or, you know, things like this, you quickly realize that the rent is just one piece of what it means to be affordable.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. I don't see any hands. I think we're caught up on the chats. Pam, did you want to ask another question? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, go for it.
I have a concern about Boone Electric, and they need some other people on their board of directors. They're very, earlier in the year in their magazine, they said how proud they were of their coal. And I put out an announcements and asked for getting someone else, because they do have a place to have new people on their board of directors. Do you have any idea how we could go about that to get someone who is more amenable to climate change?
You know, I would, I don't in particular, but I will say that I know that it is, you know, I've had conversations in not too distant past with James Owen about this. I know that's something that Renew Missouri is trying to focus on as well, and trying to figure out how to encourage folks to apply for their board, and trying and helping people through. So, you know, I would recommend reaching out to James and the Renew
Well, he and
Missouri.
I've already talked.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just much more. I think that they're, as an organization, just kind of focused in on that, and I taking a look at cooperatives across the state of Missouri too.
Okay, thank you.
Alice, you have another question?
I do. I actually have two, but I thought maybe Kip could get an update on expungement. I know we're going to hear from Dan Viets later, but there was also the question of stacking that you brought up in your last presentation. And then I have a second question if no one else does.
I'm sorry, on the stacking of the sales tax, the 3% marijuana sales tax. So I have not had the conversation with Christy Blakemore in the last, it's been 3 weeks, I think, since we've touched base with expungements. Expungements are moving forward. They had some additional staff turnover there, but continue to work through expungements. I believe that I mean, the June 8th deadline, there were probably some counties were able to meet that. They're closing in on that what was required or what was said in the Constitution for that June 8th deadline. The big deadline will be the late December one, the one that gets a bit more complicated, where it's multiple charges, and it's not as clean as the single charge issues that with the June 8th deadline. So they're continuing to move through it. We've got a great circuit clerk staff over there who are focused on it and trying to juggle everything with, criminal cases, civil cases, also working through the expungement stuff. It's, it was an important part of the constitutional amendment number 3 for sure. And it was part of the sweetener, right? They got it, that helped get it across the finish line. It was an important piece of it, creating some equity and in my opinion, some much needed relief for individuals who have been charged with possession of marijuana. It's a challenge. It is a challenging process to expunge, and so I know that they're focused on it, and it is they're making progress. I will say that, making good progress. So,
Thank you.
Alice, why don't you go ahead and ask your other question, and then we'll go to Kip.
Okay, I don't know if this is appropriate, but Kip, and I just gave a compliment to your assessor's office. They
Yeah.
were very open to reviewing, and I brought something up to them 2 years ago, and they weren't so open in a different administration. And they were very helpful. And but in looking at property taxes, they are fairly high, or at least I felt like mine was, and we've had several increases. And given your knowledge of the budget committee, maybe electing our Boone County State Senator would help. Would this state, do you feel like there's a climate to ever look at things like the Homesteader Act for property taxes or some rebate for seniors? We don't have much in the state to help people.
right. And so, so the recent valuation changes, right, that went out from the assessor's office. Kenny's great. He does a great job. He was, part of that valuation and reassessment period is set out in state statute. He doesn't enjoy sending out those letters. There should be a conversation amongst the stakeholders and the taxing entities soon on figuring out on likely you'll see a reduction in levies with the assessed value going up, because it is supposed to be as relative revenue neutral as possible. There was a bill that made it across the finish line this year, Senate Bill 190, that made it across the finish line that would provide seniors, well, in theory and intent, it would provide seniors the ability to kind of freeze property tax value, real estate value at its rate. But there are several technical issues with the bill. We don't necessarily expect the governor to veto it, but a letter of the law state have very real concerns about how it's written. In particular, one of the, just as something as simple as who is eligible for this. Those individuals would be eligible for this, basically freeze in property tax value, and what they're labeling as a tax credit. It's really not a tax credit, but those individuals would be those eligible for Social Security benefit. Technically I'm eligible for Social Security benefit, right? I've already hit all my quarters. I'm eligible for that benefit. I'm not drawing yet, but I am eligible. And so are likely the vast majority of those individuals who are, who have been working for a number of years into their 30s or early 40s in Boone County. And so there's some very real concerns about, is this much more expansive than the intent? And would this be extremely detrimental to public schools that, especially in the city of, a school district like Columbia, where, 65 to, upwards of 70, I think it's above 65% of their funding anymore comes from that local tax base. And so depending on how, if this were to go into effect, we want them to clean up that language. And we want them to clarify the intent with actually what's in the letter of law, because we're a letter of the law state, right? We're not, legislative intent doesn't matter as much as what's in the actual statute.
Great. Kathy, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, excuse me. Kip, I missed what was the focus of the ARPA RFP.
So the ARPA, so the American Rescue Plan Act, we didn't, the county chose not to set any additional restrictions on categories of funding. We invited any entity that interpreted their request as an eligible expenditure as defined by both statute, federal statute, and United States Treasury. We encourage them to apply. And so no additional restrictions on how that funding can be used. And so all the applications before us, they indicated in statute and in Treasury regulations why they feel that they're eligible. And then we'll certainly work closely with our legal department moving forward on determining if the projects that are receiving initial approval are eligible.
Dave Rathel, go ahead.
Yeah, just a clarification on the property tax question. So the bill that you mentioned is, I thought there was another bill that was going to give local jurisdiction the authority to freeze property tax increases by plebiscite for, senior citizens. How, is that the same bill you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the same one, right? That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And that's certainly how it's been reported, what the articles about it have reflected. But if you look at the statute in Senate Bill 190, there are, I know the Missouri Association of Counties and other associations submitted their technical concerns to the governor's office, and we don't expect a veto on it, but would expect some directive from the governor's office to the General Assembly to clarify those issues before this were to move forward and go into effect.
Okay, so at some point, everyone's got to start saying, we're no longer an agricultural society, so property taxes as a source of public funds is not really the most rational thing to do anymore.
I mean, that's certainly, there's certainly pushes within Jefferson City, right? And property tax, and certainly personal property tax, we know is a regressive taxing mean, and it is, there are problematics. Now, what's being proposed is eliminating those or eliminating those taxes, and in theory that sounds good, but there's no plan to replace that with any other type of revenue. And in a state with Missouri, where we're 50th in the nation or close to it still in state support for public education, where most of those local tax dollars go to fund the public school districts, something like that would just be absolutely devastating to public education in the state of Missouri, just decimate it. I mean, it would. Yeah.
And then, so for one more clarification on that, all the tax cuts that have gone through the legislature the past, sessions or whatever, they can't be reinstalled without a vote to the public. In other words, the legislature can cut taxes, but they can't do much to raise them, correct?
Correct, yeah, and right, unless it came under the Hancock threshold,
Right.
That's a pretty small threshold. I mean,
Pretty small.
Relatively speaking.
Do you think the average voter who sends a Republican to Jefferson City to cut taxes realizes what they're doing to themselves?
I think there's a group in Jefferson City who would be supportive, are supportive of reducing personal property tax, reducing property tax burden, who at least report and conversations to, yeah, we need to have a solution. And then there's another group is like, nope, we're just going to get rid of it.
Okay.
And good luck. And, you know, you've got to kind of question what the motive of those individuals are. I hate to question anyone's motives, but, you know, having known them and worked with them, you got to kind of question, is it really, are they trying to do it for the betterment of people, or are they just trying to crash the system?
Yeah, break things.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. It's 12:59. Commissioner Kendrick, thank you so much for your time and coming and fielding questions from, I mean, you didn't know what you're going to get hit with. It was a little of this and a little of that. And it's like a, you know, like a firing squad. What are we going to ask next, right? Parks and pot, all sorts of things. But yeah, we appreciate your time and all the other county officials and city officials who showed up today. We appreciate you all taking your lunch hours to sit and have these conversations with us. I'm going to hand this over to Pam Springsteel, who's going to do the announcements. And there's really no, I don't have anything to talk about with the membership as far as a meeting this month. So we'll do the announcements and then we can chat a little bit if anybody wants to hang around for a bit, but pretty low key from here on out.